The dust choked him, not from the trail, but from the memory that rode in with the stranger. One glance, and the world tilted. It was like looking at a ghost. The spitting image of the man buried beneath the lone mesquite tree on the ridge. The man he'd called Pa. A cold dread snaked through his gut. This ain't right, he thought, his hand instinctively resting on the warm grip of his Colt. This ain't right at all. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Lazy M ranch, painting the familiar landscape in hues of orange and gold. It was like staring into a faded daguerreotype of his father, young again, strong and vital, riding into town after a long cattle drive. The same broad shoulders, the same set to the jaw. The way the brim of his hat dipped just so, even the slight, almost imperceptible slouch in the saddle. It was Pa, but Pa had been gone for 10 years, taken by a bandit's bullet in a dusty saloon in San Angelo. Yet, here was this man, a carbon copy, riding with an almost arrogant familiarity, as if he owned the very dust his horse kicked up. For Cole, the steady rhythm of ranch life was as ingrained as the calluses on his hands. The scent of dry earth and pine, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of leather as he cinched his saddle, these were the bedrock of his existence. He was mending a fence near the north pasture, the rhythmic clang of hammer on wire, a comforting sound, a simple, honest chore. He'd just hammered in the last staple when he saw him. A lone rider, silhouetted against the setting sun, approached from the main road. Nothing unusual there, not at first glance, except for the sudden, inexplicable chill that ran down Cole's spine, a premonition that tightened his chest. The rider got closer, and Cole's breath hitched. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. A wild drumbeat against the silence of the prairie. His calm cowboy instinct, honed by years of watching the horizon for trouble, for bad weather or rustlers, warred with the disbelief swirling inside him. He leaned against the fence post, hammer forgotten, his gaze fixed on the approaching figure. This wasn't some trick of the light, no mirage born of sun-baked plains, no fever dream. This was real, and it was unsettling to the very core of his being, a direct challenge to every memory, every painful truth he'd learned to live with. He felt a prickle of sweat on his brow, despite the cooling air. He had to know who this man was, and why he looked so damn much like the one man Cole had ever truly looked up to, the man whose boots he'd tried to fill since he was old enough to walk. His choices were few. Confront the stranger head-on, demand answers, or let him pass and live with the gnawing uncertainty, the phantom of his father riding the wind. The choice, though difficult, was clear. He would meet him. The feeling in his gut told him the worst was yet to come, and this stranger was just the beginning of a storm brewing on his quiet horizon. The stranger dismounted at the ranch house, his movements eerily similar to Pa's, a fluid grace born of countless hours in the saddle, a smile that mirrored Pa's when he was about to tell a tall tale. Name's Elias, just passing through, looking for a place to rest a spell. Heard this was a good outfit. Elias looked around, his gaze lingering on the porch swing, the very swing where Pa used to smoke his pipe after a long day, watching the sunset. He even seemed to breathe in the familiar scent of the place, as if recalling it from a distant memory. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions, with the weight of resemblance. Cole could feel the burden of his father's legacy pressing down on him, a burden made heavier by Elias's uncanny presence. He narrowed his eyes, trying to find some flaw, some difference, anything to break the unsettling illusion, but there was none. This ain't just any ranch, Elias. This was my Pa's. And you look just like him. An ease with the dust and the open sky. His gaze met Cole's, and for a fleeting moment, Cole saw something in those eyes, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps something more ancient and unsettling, a shared secret. Is that so? Elias said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He took a step closer, and Cole instinctively tensed, his muscles coiling. Funny thing, this world, full of surprises. Cole's mind raced, desperate for an answer. Was this a long-lost relative, a brother his father never spoke of? Or was it something far more sinister, a con, a threat? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control of the situation, that this stranger held a piece of his past, a piece that could shatter everything he knew about his family, about himself. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the ranch in an eerie twilight, painting the familiar barns and fences in shades of gray. Cole felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He was losing precious time, precious control. This Elias, this living ghost, was slowly, deliberately taking it from him, pulling him into a mystery he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. Cole walked towards him, every step measured, his hand still hovering near his gun, the worn leather of the holster a familiar comfort against his hip. The stranger pulled off his hat, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes that held a familiar glint, a spark of something that both drew Cole in and pushed him away. "Evening, son," the stranger said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly like his father's. A voice that could settle a nervous horse or calm a fretful child. Cole felt a tremor of something akin to fear, but he pushed it down, replacing it with a steely resolve. "Evening," Cole replied, his voice gruff, his throat tight. "Who are you, and what brings you to my ranch?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the stranger's lips. Elias's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of something unreadable. The next morning, the air was thick with unease, a heavy blanket that smothered the usual morning sounds of the ranch. The steady rhythm of his horse's hooves on the dirt trail was usually a comfort, but today it just beat out a frantic tune in his mind. He remembered the day Pay died. The news, delivered by a rider with a grim face, had shattered his world. He remembered the raw, agonizing grief, the consuming anger, the desperate need for answers that never quite solidified. The official story was a botched robbery, a hero's end, but whispers had always lingered in the saloon, around campfires, rumors of a secret life. A past Pa had kept hidden even from his own son. Now, with Elias's arrival, those whispers became a roaring torrent in his ears, louder than any wind. His controlled emotions, usually buried deep beneath a cowboy's stoic exterior, began to stir. A raw, aching sense of betrayal pricked at him. Had his father lived a lie? Elias had accepted Cole's grudging offer of a bunk in the barn. Then the stark, unforgiving beauty of the Badlands. The red rock formations rose like ancient sentinels, silent witnesses to countless secrets, their jagged peaks seeming to pierce the very sky. He found himself, almost unconsciously, at the old abandoned prospector's shack, a place he hadn't visited since he was a boy, a place Pa used to take him to think when he was troubled. Inside, the dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed for years. But on a crude, wobbly shelf near the back wall, a tarnished silver locket caught his eye, glinting faintly in the weak light filtering through a broken window. It was his mother's, given to Pea before she died, a delicate piece of jewelry that had always symbolized their enduring love. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the faded, almost illegible engraving. He'd thought it lost years ago, perhaps stolen in the very robbery that supposedly claimed his father. Why would Pa have left it here, in this forgotten place? And then, a memory cold and sharp surfaced from the depths of his childhood. Pa, talking in hushed tones with a stranger outside this very shack. Their voices too low to make out, their faces obscured by the dimming light. He hadn't thought much of it then, a boy absorbed in the adventure of exploring a dusty old shack. Now, it screamed of secrets, of clandestine meetings, of a life he never knew. He had a choice: chase after the elusive, potentially devastating truth, no matter how painful, or turn his back on the past, ride away, and try to forget the ghost in his barn. The locket felt heavy in his hand, a tangible, unforgiving link to a past that was demanding to be unearthed, piece by agonizing piece. His heart screamed for answers, for the truth about the man he'd loved and revered. His reason, however, warned of the potential devastation of a family legacy shattering into 1,000 fragments. A silent agreement hanging between them that Cole would get answers, and Elias would provide them. As Cole saddled his horse for the morning rounds, the leather cool and smooth beneath his hands, a specific memory surfaced, sharp and clear, cutting through the fog of his worry. He saw Pa, his big, calloused hands guiding Cole's smaller ones, teaching him to tie a perfect, quick-release knot for the lariat. "A good knot," Pa had said, his voice gentle, smelling of tobacco and honest sweat. "Can save your life, son. But some things you just gotta let go of." The words echoed now, a cruel irony given the man sleeping in his barn, a living embodiment of something Cole desperately needed to understand, but perhaps should have left buried. Cole rode out, the familiar plains blurring into a backdrop for his swirling thoughts. He rode further than usual, the flatlands giving way to rolling hills. Cole found Elias at the main house, sitting on the porch swing, cleaning his pistol with a meticulous, almost ritualistic focus that sent another jolt through Cole. He held up the locket, letting it dangle between them. "This," he said, his voice a low growl, "was my mother's. My pa cherished it more than anything." Cole pressed, his breath catching in his throat. A cold dread snaking through him as he sensed the darkness approaching. Why was it in that old shack, Elias? "We were outlaws, Cole. Both of us, from the time we were barely men. Your pa, he wanted out. He wanted a clean life, a family, a legacy that wasn't stained with blood and dirt. But leaving ain't easy, especially when you're tied up with the likes of Jennaday Stone." The name hung in the air, a whisper of notoriety, of a notorious bandit whose name was spoken with fear across the territories. Stone tracked him. He was relentless. Your pa knew he had to disappear completely, make a clean break, or Stone would never stop. And I helped him. Made it look like he died in a robbery. A way for him to finally be free, to become the man you knew. The one out in the Badlands? His father, an outlaw? His entire life, a carefully constructed lie? The world spun, the familiar lines of the ranch house blurring into an indistinct swirl. Everything he believed, everything he held sacred, was shattering around him, breaking into sharp, painful pieces. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to lash out, to deny it all, to call Elias a liar, a cruel trickster. "You're lying," he spat, though even as he said it, a chilling certainty began to settle in his gut, a cold dread that this was the truth. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creak of the porch swing as Elias slowly rocked back and forth, and the frantic pounding of Cole's own heart. It was the moment everything seemed lost, the foundation of his life crumbling beneath his feet. Then Elias spoke again, his voice softer now, laced with a solemn warning. "I came back, Cole, because Jedediah Stone is back, and he knows your pa ain't dead. He's coming for him and for anyone connected to him. He's coming for you." Elias's gaze dropped to the locket, and Cole saw it then, a flicker of something in those deep-set eyes, recognition, a fleeting pain, perhaps even regret, quickly masked. "That's a long story, boy. A story your pa didn't want you to know." The scent of gun oil hung faintly in the air. "We need to talk," Cole said, his voice tight, rough with emotion. The silver locket clutched in his hand, its cold metal a grounding presence. Elias looked up, his eyes unreadable, reflecting the setting sun like chips of flint. He didn't flinch, didn't show surprise. "Seems we do, son," he replied, his voice calm, too calm. Cole stepped onto the porch, his boots thudding heavily on the worn wood. "Then tell it to me," Cole demanded, his voice rising, raw with the accumulated years of unspoken questions, of secrets, of dusty roads and hard living. "I am your pa's brother, his twin." The words hit Cole like a physical blow, like a fist to the gut. A twin? His father had a twin brother, and he'd never known? The very ground beneath him felt unsteady. And that locket, it belonged to our mother. He left it there because that's where we said our last goodbyes, to each other, and to the life we knew. Elias paused, his gaze meeting Cole's, steady and unwavering. He changed his name, left his past behind. Elias continued, his voice low, almost a whisper. After something happened. Something bad. Something he couldn't outrun. The carefully constructed calm of a lifetime beginning to crack and crumble. Tell me who you are and why you look exactly like him. And don't tell me you're just passing through. I ain't some greenhorn. Elias sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. What happened? Elias's eyes, so like his father's, hardened, reflecting a deep-seated weariness. Cole stumbled back, reeling, clutching the locket so tightly his knuckles turned white. The news from Elias had left Cole reeling, feeling as though he'd been kicked by a mule. Not the lone mesquite tree on the ridge where he'd said his goodbyes, but the official marker in the small town cemetery. Then back at the familiar sweep of his ranch, the place he'd poured his life into, the land his father had supposedly tamed. Leaving it would be like tearing out a part of himself, severing a limb. The thought of abandoning his home, his legacy, his very identity, brought a fresh wave of pain, a deep ache in his chest. Yet, the alternative was a grim one, staying and facing a vengeful outlaw who had connections to his father's darkest secrets, a man who would stop at nothing. That same stubborn feeling from the first chapter, the one that told him something was fundamentally wrong, was screaming at him now, telling him this was his only way out, his only chance to survive and understand. He clenched his jaw, the muscles tight. The path forward was fraught with risk, a journey into the unknown, chasing the truth about a man he thought he knew, a man who remained a mystery even in death. But the choice, however bitter, however devastating, had to be made. With a heavy heart and a newfound unsettling resolve, Cole took the map. He would go. He would face this past, whatever it held, whatever horrors lay hidden in its depths. Courage and doubt rode side by side as he prepared to leave, two grim companions on the long road ahead. Josiah Cole, a good man, a loving father. The words mocked him, hollow and meaningless now, etched in stone but ringing with deceit. He kicked at a loose stone, a surge of futile anger rising within him, hot and bitter. Josiah Cole was a lie, a ghost of a man. His real name, his true past, all buried deeper than any grave could hold. The wind knocked out of him. Just as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Elias appeared, his silhouette against the fading light a familiar, yet still unnerving, sight. He held out a worn leather map, its edges frayed from years of handling, from countless journeys across rugged terrain. "There's a place," Elias said, his voice low, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Ever vigilant. A hideout Pay and I used to use, deep in the Black Ridge. It's remote, well-stocked, a place where even Stone's men would have trouble finding you. If Jedediah Stone is truly coming, that's your best chance for safety. But it means leaving everything, Cole. Everything you know. Everything you've built." Physically, he was unharmed, but inside, a raw, gaping wound festered. His father, a phantom, an outlaw, a man who had lied about his very existence. The ranch, once a sanctuary, a place of peace and order, now felt like a cage, its familiarity replaced by a chilling sense of vulnerability, of a target painted on his back. He walked through the dusty corrals, the familiar scent of horse and hay, usually comforting, now just another reminder of a life built on a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. Even with Elias present, a blood relative, he felt a profound, aching loneliness, the kind that settled deep in a cowboy's soul when the world decided to throw a curveball, when the ground shifted beneath his boots. He found himself back at the grave again. Just as despair threatened to consume him, Cole looked at the map. The ride to Black Ridge was a blur of dust and grim determination, each mile a silent testament to the shattering of his old life. Cole pushed himself and his horse, the distant rumble of hooves, the glint of steel in the harsh sun. Elias was bleeding, a deep graze on his arm, but he was alive. Cole stood over Stone, the man who had haunted his father's life. Painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple, Cole looked out at the vast, endless expanse of the land. He was tired, bone-deep tired, but in his heart, a quiet, resolute strength had taken root. The echoes of his father's choices, of Elias's stories, of the battle he'd fought, had reshaped him, broadened his understanding of what it meant to be a man in a world that seldom offered easy answers. He had lost the comforting illusion of a simple past, but gained a profound, if complicated, truth. He adjusted the brim of his hat, his gaze steady on the horizon, the faint smell of gun smoke still clinging to his clothes. The journey had ended, but the road ahead, as always, stretched long and winding, carrying with it the promise of untold stories, of a life yet to be truly lived. Some things, he murmured to the fading light, the words feeling heavy and true, you just gotta let go of ... But others, you carry with you, always. And now, his own. He could have ended it, put a bullet in the outlaw and buried the past forever. But a lifetime of walking the straight path, of upholding justice, held him back. He disarmed Stone, leaving him to face the law, to face the consequences of his own bitter choices. Jedediah Stone's men had found them. His ranch was still standing, untouched by Stone's men. A small, fragile victory in a landscape of immense personal loss and upheaval. Nothing was truly the same. The quiet solitude of his life was gone, shattered, replaced by a raw, painful understanding of the world's complexities, of human flaws and hidden truths. He had found a hidden brother, confronted a ghost from his past, and faced down a danger that had threatened to consume him. He was no longer just a cowboy tending his ranch. He was the son of a man who'd lived two lives. A man transformed by harsh truths and the brutal lessons of the frontier. The air shattered with the crack of rifle fire, the shouts of men, and the thunderous thud of hooves against rock. Cole fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, a primal instinct to protect what little he had left, his life, and this newfound fragile connection to his family. He fought alongside Elias, a strange, unspoken bond forging between them in the raw, brutal heat of battle. Elias, with his years of hard-earned experience, moved with a lethal efficiency, covering Cole's back as if they'd been fighting side by side their whole lives. In the chaos, Cole saw Stone, a hulking figure, his face contorted with rage, his eyes fixed on Elias, raising his rifle. Without thinking, Cole dove, tackling Stone just as the shot rang out. The bullet found its mark not in Elias, but in Stone's shoulder, a guttural scream of pain erupting from the outlaw. The rest of Stone's men, seeing their leader fall, his vengeance thwarted, broke and scattered, melting back into the shadows of the Badlands, driven by a gnawing fear for his home and a desperate, consuming need to uncover the full, unvarnished truth. Elias, a silent shadow at his side, guided him through winding trails and hidden passes, his knowledge of the desolate landscape absolute. They traveled for days, eating sparingly, sleeping little, until they reached a secluded clearing nestled deep within the jagged peaks, a place that felt untouched by the outside world. A crude cabin, barely visible against the dark rock faces, stood waiting, a sanctuary of last resort. They spent days there, tense and watchful, the silence of the mountains punctuated only by the distant cries of hawks. Elias, surprisingly, began to open up, slowly like a spring thaw. He filled in the agonizing gaps of his father's past, of the hard choices and devastating sacrifices made to build a new life, a life free of the shadow of Jedediah Stone, Cole listened, his anger slowly giving way to a complex blend of understanding, empathy, and a lingering, profound sadness. His father hadn't been perfect, hadn't been the spotless hero of his childhood dreams. But he had fought for his future, for their future, with a desperate courage Cole now understood. Then, the inevitable. The dust settled, leaving behind an eerie silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Cole rode back to the Lazy M, the journey back imbued with a new, somber meaning. Standing on the porch of his ranch, watching the sun dip below the horizon,